whoever you are, wherever you are in this season, you are welcome here. This is going to be just about an hour webinar presentation today. It's going to be recorded if you need to catch some of the slides later. And you will remain in mute. This is actually not going to be a webinar where we have any discussion. Part of that is because I want this to be a little bit more of a meditative receiving experience for you, and I invite you to try to slip into that space. I'll be available after the webinar if people want to go deeper on anything. It's also the kind of thing I could have pre-recorded and just had available, but it felt like in this time, in this week, that it was just simply important to offer this live and have people gathered, even though there won't be discussion. So just trust that you are with good people seeking to be the best they can and honor God during this season. I want to start with 3 invitations. The first is to breathe, to know that that is a spiritual act of trying to welcome and breathe in the breath and life of God, as well as a physical act, reminding you that you are here, you're important, you've been created. And I want to invite you to trust that God is with us, trust that we are with God, even though we're not sure what that may mean for this time or the future. And therefore, the third invitation is important as well, and that is to listen. To try to listen in new ways, to stretch your ears and your spirit as you do that. So breathe, trust, and listen the best you can. I'm Yonce Shelton. I'm the Executive Director of Catholic Volunteer Network, and many of the attendees today are from our network, but we may have a few others from different communities joining us, and so welcome to everyone. If you're not familiar with CVN, Catholic Volunteer Network is a large network of over 150 member programs that support full-time faith-based service. So you can sort of think about a handful of people living together in intentional community for a year, going deeper with faith and serving others in the community and learning about mercy and justice and what that means for their journey. And the member program leaders on this webinar are people trying to support them, trying to lead, trying to figure out, especially in this time, what does it mean to help them be the best, to do the best they can and be safe. Today's offering is, my prayer is that you just see where it leads you and that it can empower you in some way. And just trust that being together and bringing desire that way can help. So change, it's a word I think of when I think about where we are right now. These are a few quotes, and I think some of you may be familiar with the first one, the difference between change and transition. Some of you may be familiar with the second one, that change equals loss equals grief. I would add that transition is not just psychological, but it's also spiritual. It touches us in that deep way and offers those opportunities. You know, change is when stuff happens to you and you adjust at a surface level, practically. Not too deep. You adjust and move on. You might change your commute. You might find a new place to live. The transition is much deeper, and that's what we're trying to get at today. Transition is wondering, how does a change affect you more personally? How does it call you to a deeper place? What new awarenesses might you be invited to consider? Can it teach you more about who you really are at the deepest levels? It's a lot scarier than just change, but it's also better if you value meaning, journey, and trust. It's about asking why, about wondering about feelings and impulses and emotions, questioning your patterns and ways of usual. And so a big invitation today is to engage transition, to see it as a gift for you and your relationship with God, especially at this time. And part of that is to invite a deeper understanding of loss during this season. even though that may not be clear or easier than known or completed when you would like it to be. During our time today, there'll be a few places where I pause and let you reflect. And we're not sharing during this presentation, so I encourage you to just sort of be honest, go with what comes to you, capture things on paper if that helps you, but also feel no pressure to force something. There may be times where you're not sure, and that's all right. Sit and receive the best you can. And so to help us enter into this transitional time, I think first what we have to do is to name loss. That requires thinking, what have you lost because of coronavirus? Loss that happens because of a pandemic like this is different than the death of a loved one or other losses that are more normalized in our society and people understand a little bit differently. Loss during this time might be more about relationships and their complexity, whether that's separation or stress. It might have to do with your freedom in different ways. It might have to do with your sense of security, your future plans, and your hopes for others and yourself. Health, sense of well-being, uncertainty around that, as well as just your comfort level, your tolerance level for things that may have changed because of how you now see the world and understand it. And perhaps the biggest one I think we all hopefully are naming is control. We've lost some control, but there is some control we can still have. A few other things to help think about loss, especially in this new time, is that sometimes a loss is immediate and happens and affects you in the present, but it also has implications for the future. An example is, someone losing a child, going through that pain and that event and the mourning and bereavement and the loss that occurs, that loss, but also losing who that child would have been in the years and decades that follow. There are two losses there. Another example that at least this community I think is aware of perhaps a little bit more is, a college graduate right now. A loss could be losing that job offer or that next step that was so certain and excited about. It's a concrete loss, but there's also a loss of what would that have led to in the coming decades? What would have happened because of that step? There's a loss there as well. And when you think about loss, there's also one other offering that I've picked up over the years, and that is sometimes it's good to do a loss inventory. A loss inventory, sometimes there's times in life where you need to think, what all have I lost and how's that impact on me? And I was just thinking and preparing for that just around COVID, this pandemic, can I name or start to name what all I have lost and how that's affected me? A few other things about loss is that change equals loss equals grief. Even good changes can produce loss. For a child to graduate from high school and go off to college, I think in most people's view that is a good change, but there's also a loss involved for the parent and perhaps the college kid, depending on your kid. Moving across town, across the country, a good move, a desired move, a choice, is a change that is good, but it also creates loss of certain community relationships, rhythms, or routines. And the other thing is that in this situation with coronavirus, I've heard a lot of people, and myself, I've thought about what can be gained from this time. These are changes that will set off things, and how do I understand the good that can come of that? And sometimes a loss may have a trade-off that is better, and that may not sit so well depending on what that is. But that's a reality that I invite you to consider during this time. And so I want to give you just a few minutes here as you're looking at and hearing about loss to stop and think, what does loss in this time mean to you? Just a few minutes. So I invite you to trust that whatever came to you is the right thing for now. And as I'll try to mention as we go throughout this hour, you can come back to that. It's not the end of giving that attention. And I also invite you to trust that Jesus knows all that you have named and unnamed. He knows you, and he knows the impact on you. This is a passage about Jesus' baptism. It talks about how Jesus comes to be baptized and John tries to fight it, saying, I can't do this. Jesus says, allow it for now, for thus it is fitting for us to fulfill all righteousness. Soon after the pandemic got worse and a lot of people went to remote work, this is actually a reflection I shared with CDN members on a call and did some writing around it. I tried to remind you that we are in Lent, and this is a passage that comes just before the wilderness experience where we traditionally mark Lent. And I had you think about that this was Jesus choosing to be with people in messiness and struggle before he went into the wilderness to learn more about his calling. He was identifying himself with the Judeans, accepting a path of struggle. It was the fully human and fully divine Jesus leaning into that full humanity a little bit more. And he knew that what came next probably wasn't going to be too easy. And I offer this because we can't control too much about the coronavirus, but we can control our focus and how we discern how to use our gifts and resources. It requires us to find the right balance between trusting God and doing what we can to grow with God. And that's what Jesus did by saying yes to baptism in this entry in the wilderness. So we have some control. We can say yes to the baptismal calling to become who we are with others in great times of challenge. So part of this session is me offering a prayer for you that you have what you need to choose well for help when you don't, and to continue to serve and lead in communities that have never been predictable. So may this time help a little bit. It's a prayer, it's an invitation. Holy Week is a great time to be taking this on because we've gone through Lent and Jesus has been on a journey. And again in this week, Jesus chooses to engage pain and confusion. He engages his journey, his calling, his relationship with the Father. So it offers us a chance to focus on how Jesus was in transition, how he invited others to be part of that, and how it empowered them to know themselves and the world. We are all invited to listen to God in a similar way during this time. Maybe share that with others and name and claim that this is a very unique time. So part of the goal today is to help you choose. Help you choose to name what transition means for you now. And in doing so, to help you open to God a little bit more. So Lenten transition. I invite you to think about the losses you named or thought of or wrote down a few minutes ago. Continue to be with those and reflect on these questions for a few moments in silence. Where are you now? What choices can you make? What do you seek from God? How can you open to God? Naming things like this can give you some power, but it also must still open you to a different space, a different posture with God, and help you bring this to God differently. So we will soon remember the Last Supper, pivotal night and time for leading us to the end of Holy Week. Jesus says, you don't understand what I'm doing now, but you will understand later. This is a time when the fully divine Jesus knows about his coming transition and wants to include his friends, his disciples. I think he's trying to name some things for them, to prepare them, to help them, even though he can't do that fully. He's modeling what it means to name the time intentionally, trying to help people step into that. Now, the fully human Jesus is more like you, more like me, more like us. I think he's doing his best to help them and to figure some things out himself as he senses the importance of this time. He's aware of questions, fears, the different motives, personalities, and emotions around him. And he's trying to do this well. And so I see the Last Supper as really marking a time of stepping back, slowing down, and naming transition with some intentionality. And also, it's a way of expressing gratitude for honoring the reality of loss, of admitting the unknown, and affirming that sense of a future calling. It's got a lot going on, especially if you think about it from this position of fully human and fully divine. And I would think, if you're like me, you resonate more with the human Jesus on this and his disciples. And that hopefully you can receive, share, and witness and honor to some of this and what's going on without exactly knowing what comes next. So understanding the Last Supper and other parts of this week as very unique times that invite us, that give us opportunities, that sort of connect past, future, and present all together. These are unique times to engage loss, transition, and invitation. Another way to look at this time and a lot of Holy Week is as liminal space. If you're not familiar with liminal space, think of it as a threshold of going from one room to another. It is the thin space when God is near, when things happen that you feel the presence of God. You're crossing over, going from here to there. You're aware at a sensory level more so than in your head. You're okay to welcome that, not understand it all, and try to control less. And a lot of times, liminal space, you can learn how to take control of physical acts and ritual to make that more real and to foster that process. But the key to liminal space is that is where transformation and transition happen. The key is that we can't always control that. Sometimes we are thrust into liminal space, and we learn to recognize that and do our best. Sometimes we see ways that we can nurture that and invite and be a little bit more ready for that. And I think this quote from Richard Rohr really gets to the heart of liminal space and may help you understand a little bit about what it is. if you don't understand it, or if you're not sure you've experienced it. Betwixt and between. The old world is left behind, and we're not sure of the new existence. It's where newness can begin. It's sacred space, where it's okay if things fall apart and something bigger is revealed. God's waiting room, where we are taught openness and patience as we seek an appointment with the divine doctor. The Last Supper was a type of liminal space. Much of Jesus' journey was. And we know what is coming, and that is the cross. And the cross presents us a choice because we know it's coming to welcome liminality, to engage in transition, if we bring our full selves with as much honesty and openness as we can. So the cross is transition. It is about old and new, loss and gain, fear and hope. It points towards hope, but only because we understand the full story, we have the benefit of seeing it backwards, and we're able to hopefully accept that. The trick is not just accepting it as something that happened in the past, but accepting that it is something that can be good for us now. It's the major transition for Jesus. Huge deal, to say the least. Pivotal aspect of our faith that defines, or should define, almost everything about how we understand the world and how we're called into this world. Whatever Jesus knew divinely, he still had to make the transition humanly. He had to die before being resurrected. He had to let go of some control and to open to what was next. He had to trust God. So again, a few minutes here to reflect on the two questions at the bottom of this screen. What do you need to let go of now? Maybe because of this time that we're really aware of. What do you pray comes after that, without holding on to that too tightly? So hopefully now you are more aware of what's stirring in you, what's going on in you, as well as potentially a new way to look at our faith in this time and this week. I want to offer you something else that hopefully can help this journey. I spent years in training as a pastoral counselor and then offering pastoral counseling and spiritual direction with individuals and small communities. And something that I picked up that really shaped how I understood loss and working with people and faith is by William Worden, and it's called The Tasks of Mourning. Worden does have a spiritual bent in how he understands this. In his career and where he served, he worked at a few divinity schools and embraces spirituality, but I'm not sure how Christocentric he may be, and that's okay. But I want to offer you this as a way of thinking about Jesus' journey that I think speaks to that. There are 4 tasks of mourning: to accept the reality of the loss, to work through the pain, to adjust to the new reality, and to relocate the relationship and find new life. Now, I think Worden and most people, when you think of loss, you think of the death of a person. And so this may be a little bit more applicable there, but I do think it is broad enough to apply to other losses that sometimes we don't think as much about. And I just think, based on my experiences and own personal transitions, that this helps understand what Jesus did and went through and offers us something as well. I think, obviously, the more fully human Jesus worked on or completed the first 3, but that God needed to make the 4th happen. So accepting the reality of the loss might be the most easy to understand, that, you got to be realistic about it. It happened, and it has impacts. To deny either the facts of what happened or the meaning it has on your life is to avoid and not do some of the work around grief that's necessary. Acceptance requires intellectual and emotional acceptance. Now, intellectual may seem a little easier, and emotional could be harder, but that might be different for different people. And that's hard to fully control, especially emotionally, when that hits you. So all of this can take time. It can be a process. But I think that Jesus accepted his path and understood what would be lost, that he prepared for that all along, that he named that in an intentional way and accepted that. The second task is working through the pain. So a few things about naming a loss and working with it. Society doesn't often validate what can cause us pain. Someone dies, sure. The death of a pet, moving, and the loss that might cause. Not always accepted as much what it can do to you. And so sometimes we have to go against the grain and affirm that something is having an impact, and that we have to name that and work on that pain. Because if you minimize it, as other people might, then you're going to avoid the need to grieve in the process. You're going to avoid things that you actually have some control of to help move you along. Working through the pain can also be just that brutal sense of loss, as well as emotions of anger, anxiety, guilt, depression, and loneliness. Sometimes people don't always associate with loss or grief. Some of you may actually even be familiar with the term disenfranchised grief. That is grief that persons experience when they incur a loss that is not or cannot be openly acknowledged, socially sanctioned, or publicly mourned. It's the kind of grief that sometimes people don't know what to do with, or don't know how to acknowledge, or don't even see a need for. And I honestly think it's probably to be determined what the coronavirus means for us as individuals and as a society. But I do think that Jesus worked through the pain. He endured the physical, emotional, and mental pain of accepting his call, going through this week. He did not go around that. He knew it was part of what he had to do. The third task is adjusting to the new reality. And there's three aspects of this. One is external. How do you function every day? How do you keep things going? How do you do things differently to keep a household running or to keep your life in order? The other is more internal. It speaks to this sense of yourself. The world changes when somebody dies or a pandemic hits and changes a lot about your life. It may have you question your efficacy, your ability to be and do the way you want to or think you should. And then a spiritual component. These losses can challenge assumptions about meaning in the world. It doesn't mean you have a crisis of faith or you lose faith, but it means that there's an invitation to go deeper in the think in a new way about what this does to the spiritual part of you. And again, I think that Jesus stepped into this and even tried to prepare his disciples because of what he realized about the new reality they were in and that they were moving to. And the last task is to relocate the relationship and find new life. This is hard because this is the one that I think is a God thing in terms of our Christian faith. We don't know as much as we would like to about God. We don't understand that elusive relationship all the time. We can't talk about it or think about it in ways we may want. Hopefully we can experience and know in certain ways. But this calls us to be open to what God must do in terms of helping us mourn, process a loss, and understand Holy Week and Jesus' loss. Resurrection needs God. There's a new relationship between the Father and the Son that we experience at resurrection, and a new relationship with God in us. And resurrection is so key to our faith. It is meant to shape how we live and transition and trust. I believe that the crucifixion and resurrection, this whole story, was not just done for us, but it was done to give us a model and to help shape our journey well, to help us realize the reality of loss and letting go and being reborn. So the more we can embrace and name the liminal times, the better we can know what this might mean for us and prepare to do it well. So breathe. Take a breath. This is a lot. Trust where it's landing with you. Don't try to force yourself to come up with anything. Just take this in. Be in the best space you can. So where are you and how are you? You've just heard about the task of mourning. It's okay not to know everything that these questions may pose. It's okay not to know where you are and what you're doing. I don't even know where I am with all this yet, and I've been thinking about talking to you about this and what it means for days and weeks, not to mention the years of this being part of my faith and how I understand loss. And remember that Warden's model, the wording, the application is not exact. That this process is actually not linear. You don't have to do 1, 2, 3, 4. Some of these come and go. Some of these take more time. It's just as fluid and amorphous sometimes as faith and the way we experience it. So I want to give you just a few minutes now to sit, again, with the losses you've named, maybe others that have come up as we've been together, as well as these 4 tasks, and just see what's coming up, see what it's doing to you. So again, whatever came to you in this time is right for now. You can always come back to it. And the goal of this is not for you to obsessively try to figure out how these tasks fit with Holy Week and if you believe certain ideas or not. It's to spark something in you that might lead you to a deeper, more open awareness of loss in this time with God. To see how God is working with you personally. Again, to let go, accept certain things, and continue to transition well. And so some of you may be thinking right now, so Last Supper and Resurrection, but we skipped a little bit there. And it is true, we've talked about two key events, but I do want to draw our attention to part of Holy Week that sometimes doesn't get as much attention, or attention in the same way. And make the argument that Holy Saturday is really a liminal space. It's a between time of the cross and resurrection. It's a time where we are invited, even forced, to name and be in ways that may be uncomfortable, uncertain. But it's also a great invitation to pay attention and to choose to go to that time, to let go and to trust God. It's a choice. It's something that can empower you to name loss and need, the confusion, the letting go. Yes, we know the story, we know what happens. But to put yourself in that place and be differently at that time is a great invitation. So it's a chance to honor what is in between. To honor what we know is coming in one sense, but that we don't. Because again, this is about you and Jesus. It is about our faith. It's also about your journey and your calling. And I'm not sure I know what's coming if I fully give myself to that. And this day, I believe I read that we actually know the least about Holy Saturday in terms of what happened, or even theological approaches and understanding of it. So the invitation is to resist theological busyness and focus more on your experience and awareness of God. To gently hold all you know coming into this time and all you will know leaving it. More practically, it gives you a chance to think about your Holy Saturday. Maybe plan that. What are the usual ways, places, and things you do that could take on new meaning, especially this year? Usual may not even be a term that fits for Holy Saturday. Maybe an opportunity to seize that, understand this day differently. What are new thoughts, emotions that are elicited you in this time, if you can enter into this liminal space of between? How are you drawn in and caught unawares and maybe pleasantly surprised in certain ways? And above all, remember, you're in progress. This is part of transition and transformation. There's some things that have not occurred yet. You just have to welcome and receive and continue to carry those with you. So it's a great liminal space for transition and really choosing to let go and be with God in this mystery of our faith and this mystery of God's relationship with you. So breathe. Hold this as best you can, even if it's intimidating or scary. Trust God is with us. We know what is coming, and you have prepared. But I hope you have not prepared too much. I mean, you're not fully ready for what that means for you. Jesus came and stood among them. He said, "Peace be with you." After he said this, he showed them his hands and his side. When the disciples saw the Lord, they were filled with joy. Jesus said to them again, "Peace be with you. As the Father sent me, so I am sending you." As the Father sent me, so I am sending you. Jesus appears and shows us something of the power of God to relocate and give new life, to empower. We can seek that, yearn for it, trust in it, but we can't control that transition. We have to do what we can. We have to do our work of working with us and loss and everything else before that can happen. Accepting, understanding your losses, needs, and more can take time. Like I said, Warden and his task, or any other approach to mourning, is probably not linear and not going to make sense if you try to apply it in a certain way every time, or maybe have a spreadsheet to work it out. So wherever you are is fine. And hopefully you can learn more about what you need. But I firmly believe that all of us, each of you, are called to continue a journey of trust and learning from Jesus' model. That is the choice, the freedom, the chance to respond that we have been given. To respond out of relationship with God and believing God, that God loves us and wants to nurture us and care for us. So working with loss can empower God. But you cannot do that without joy and hope and love. Joy, hope, and love. Joy, hope, and love. It's all there. The beauty, the tragedy. Our loss will not overcome us as long as we hold on to that hope, that joy, and that love. That's the way we empower God, or rather just invite God to empower us. That's how we grow and how we witness. And for this community, I think it has to do a lot with how we serve. How you are able to serve in these times. How are you able to witness and provide a model for volunteers, for people who look to you? I know you're struggling. I know it's tough. But we have to find the strength we can and lead in the ways that I know you can. We can serve, but we can also be served by others and loved by others in new ways. I ask you to breathe. Breathe. And sit for just a minute or so with the awareness of that mysterious combination of loss, joy, hope, and love. Keep breathing as an act of affirmation of God, God's Spirit moving among us. Keep breathing as an affirmation of you being a creative, loved creature of God that can transition well, help others do so, and honor a relationship with God. Trust God as best you can. Be hopeful about what that will mean for you and for your communities and the world around us. And listen as best you can. Take what has grabbed your heart during this time, what has moved in your gut, what has given a tingle up your spine. Take that and everything else that strangely may come to you this time. Listen with new ears in new ways. Do this as your intention to welcome what this week needs to be for you. Let it empower you and God together. I'm going to close simply by giving thanks to God, to you, and for the chance for all of us to accept that baptismal call and to choose relationship with God, to know we're going to mess up a lot, to continue to come back to that invitation. Amen. Thank you for all you do and who you are, and many blessings in this week. Be well, and I will see you in Easter.